Okay. Tom, I want to do commentary on their live, Robert Spencer, David Wood, and this guy anyway. Before I do that, David Wood, I know you were an atheist, and I know you believe in the Lord, which is great, but I hope you are trusting in His blood. This is the gospel. Romans 10 is not. Romans 10 is a false gospel. And David Wood, I would encourage you and your wife to read Romans 9, 10, and 11 King James Bible version for yourself in full. And you can see it's for Israel, not for the church. So this is the gospel, and this is the gospel. It's what Jesus did on the cross. This one tells you to trust in His blood. Faith in His blood. That's what we're meant to trust. And David Wood and your wife, I would encourage you one day to watch How to Get Saved by Robert Breaker. This was his video from 2010. Okay, let's play this video, and I can make commentary.
Okay, guys, I think we're live. Alright, let's just wait a sec now for it to kick into YouTube. Alright, guys, I think we're live. We're live. So, welcome to What Do You Mean? For it to kick into YouTube. Let me mute this here. Okay, welcome to What Do You Mean, guys? Thank you guys for coming to hang out. Today we got David Wood from Acts 17 Apologetics, along with Robert Spencer from Jihad Watch. And today we're going to be discussing the Tommy Robinson arrest and kind of the impact that has and what it has to do with Islam. So we're going to go ahead and hold off a little bit for question and answers for the questions until closer towards the end, and then we'll get to those. So make sure you guys stick around. And let's now start. Let's start with you, Robert, and let's talk about who is Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson, for all those who don't know who he is.
Did you say start with?
I was thinking Tony Robbins in my mind for some weird reason.
What?
Robinson.
Tommy Robinson is a working class Englishman who was born in Luton, which is a heavily Muslim area, and grew up there, saw what was happening to his country as a result of mass Muslim migration, founded a few years back a group he called the English Defence League, which was designed to offer resistance to violent Muslims who were actually attacking returning soldiers during the Veterans Day, not Veterans Day, what do they call it? Armistice Day celebrations, or Remembrance Day, it's called in Britain. And the English Defence League was specifically meant to fight back, which got it called by the British establishment, political elites, and the media a neo-Nazi group, which it never was, although it did attract unsavory elements, as might be expected given the circumstances. And ultimately, Tommy broke with the group because he said that he was unable to keep out anti-Semites and actual neo-Nazis, which he never was. After that, he had an unfortunate dalliance with the Quilliam Foundation, which is a pseudo-moderate organization, moderate Muslim organization in Britain, that claims to have decapitated, interesting choice of words, the EDL, or English Defence League, at the time when he left it. It turned out later that Tommy was placed under tremendous pressure from the British government to separate from the EDL and to embrace moderate Islam, which he attempted to do with Quilliam, but Tommy was honest enough to acknowledge, once he got to know the Quilliam Foundation people, that they were not being on the level about Islam's violent teachings, and he broke with them. And since then, he has been on his own, as far as I know, as a commentator on events, and he co-authored a book about the Quran, and he worked for a time for Rebel Media, the very excellent Canadian organization run by Ezra Levant, doing various videos, and then recently struck out on his own, making videos, and this is what got him in trouble with the police this time. He had been ordered previously not to report outside the trials of Muslim rape gangs in Britain. Of course, those rape gangs have been the subject of a massive cover-up by British authorities, who were more worried about being called racist and Islamophobic than they were about the future of their very nation and the well-being of literally tens of thousands of young girls who were brutalized by these gangs and their lives ruined. And so he was arrested some time ago and told not to report outside these trials. He went and reported again outside these trials. The prohibition on him doing so was illegitimate in the first place, and consequently, he was arrested again. The technical reasons for his arrest are that he did violate the terms of his probation, but because the terms of his probation were unjust to start with, and based on attempts to cover up, ongoing attempts to cover up the reality of Muslim rape gangs, many people in Britain have risen up and are not taking this in stride. Thousands of people demonstrated the other day demanding that he be released. He was very swiftly, under quite suspicious circumstances, sentenced to 13 months in prison within hours of his being arrested. And he's in prison now. Many Britons have pointed out that the whole thing sounds like something that would have happened in Stalinist Russia, and consequently they are very angry about it and are demanding that this preferential treatment given to the Islamic community in regard to the rape gangs be ended, that Tommy be freed, and that in the larger sense that the truth about what's happening to Britain as a result of mass Muslim migration be told and no longer covered up, either by authorities or by the media.
Yeah, and a lot of people online have been saying that it's likely that he can end up murdered inside a prison. What are your thoughts on that? What are kind of the Muslim gang?
I have been praying. I just want people to know I've been praying for Tommy Robinson's safety. I've also been praying because I don't know Tommy Robinson and I don't know if he's a Christian or not. But if he isn't, I just pray that the Lord will lead someone to teach Tommy Robinson the gospel. And I pray that Tommy Robinson then will trust Jesus to save him, and I pray that Tommy Robinson will trust the whole finished work of Jesus and his shed blood, as it says in Romans 3:21 to 28, King James version. Yeah, I don't want anyone thrown in the lake of fire. So the more people who are truly saved, the better. That's how I feel.
He's in prison, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you know, Muslims rule the British prisons, and they proselytize for jihad groups, and they do all this openly, and British authorities do nothing. And recently, Paul Golding, who is the head of a group called Britain First, was also sentenced to prison for protesting against Muslim rape gangs. And he was immediately attacked and his nose broken in prison by violent Muslims. And so it's a very real possibility that Tommy, who when he was in prison before they threatened to kill him, they very well could do so this time. And so people are saying this is essentially a death sentence. The government is trying to get this inconvenient man out of the way. It is a pattern, perhaps, with the rulers of Britain, going back to the martyrdom of St. Thomas Becket, who King, I believe it was Henry IV, said very famously, "Who will rid me of this meddlesome priest?" And people went and killed him, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and Tommy is kind of in the Becket role today. And it does many people in Britain believe that the government is hoping that he will be killed so that they will be rid of this meddlesome journalist.
Gotcha. Yeah, and before he was arrested, he was reporting about grooming gangs.
Yeah.
Wood, can you explain a little bit about what the grooming gangs are?
The grooming gangs, that in itself is a euphemism, John. They're rape gangs. They are gangs of Muslims who are going around in Britain, and they take advantage of little girls, sometimes 10, 12, 13, 14 years old. And they turn them into prostitutes and essentially sex slaves.
And that's why Islam is sickening to me. This guy is Robert Spencer. So for people who don't know who he is, this is going to be part 1 of my commentary, because their videos close to an hour and a half, under an hour and a half, so a long one.
In accord with, of course, the Quran's teachings about how infidel women can be used as sex slaves. And one of them even said not long ago that he would quote the man who was victimizing her, would quote the Quran to justify what he was doing. I know David is going to explain more about that, so I will defer. But that is really what's happening, and the British government is intent on making sure that as few people know about it as possible.
Yeah, John, you have a lot of things working together that have given rise to the situation of the grooming gangs. As Robert pointed out, you have in the Muslim sources that you can rape your female captives. You can take women, young girls captive in battle. You can buy and sell them. So you have things like that in the Muslim sources, where if you are a Muslim and you conquer an area and you capture women or girls, you're allowed to use them as your sex slaves. And this was brought up even in chapter 4, verse 24 of the Quran, where a question was brought to Muhammad: what happens when we catch both the women and their husbands? And you don't see this much from the verse, but when you look at the historical background and that the verse was meant to answer, the question was, what do we do when we capture both the men and the women? In other words, the women and their husbands. And the response from Allah was, yes, married women are forbidden to you as sex partners. Married women are forbidden to you, Muslims, unless you capture them. So if you sort of seize them, then it's all okay. But apart from that, because this is kind of a different situation, this isn't like Muslims have already gone out and captured Great Britain, although they, of course, view themselves, with some good reason, as doing that right now. I think it really goes down to more along the lines of teachings like chapter 98, verse 6, which calls Jews and Christians the worst of creatures, right? If you're the worst of creatures,
we're all sinners, and I go by what the Bible says. I know you believe in the Bible, but I hope you're trusting in Jesus' shed blood, David Wood. But Islam is sickening to me, and I don't tolerate. I'm against Islam, and I will speak out against Islam.
Lower than a pig. You're lower than a dog. You're lower than a plant, right? If that's what you are, why should anyone be concerned about treating you well or treating you nicely? And so you take that and you combine it with chapter 3, verse 110 of the Quran, which says that Muslims are the best of peoples ever raised up for mankind. And the picture you have in your head, if you take these seriously, are Muslims are really, really good and everyone else is pure scum. So who cares?
And it turns out to me that their Allah, right, is really the Satan of the Bible. That's what I truly believe, and I have no time for Islam.
If you're out there raping this little dirty scum kafir girl, right? And apart from that, I think there's that ultimately derives from that is that there's a psychological component, right? And what I mean here is, if you look at the Muslim sources and ask, according to the Muslim sources, how is the world supposed to proceed? Well, from the time of Muhammad, Islam was just supposed to keep expanding and keep expanding and keep expanding until it takes over the entire world. And Islam kept expanding very rapidly during the early years, and then, I mean, expanded all the way out east till it started hitting India and China, expanded in the west until it went all the way across northern Africa and up into Europe. So it was expanding very, very rapidly, and then all of a sudden people started standing up in those areas, and then Islam sort of hit some roadblocks. From a Muslim perspective, it didn't look like this was what was supposed to happen, but Islam was stopped. And then after that, you had, of course, once you get down to the modern period, you have the Muslim world really being just technologically backwards, military-wise. These places are backwards. Western nations are far more powerful economically, militarily. And from a Muslim perspective, you read the Muslim sources, and this isn't the way things are supposed to be. This is just not the way that things are supposed to be. So you have to be thinking that Allah has some sort of plan behind this. But right now, you have people immigrating from places like Pakistan, and they have a kind of inferiority complex here, in the sense that, wait a minute, we're supposed to be in control over you. You're not supposed to be. You're not supposed to be taking us in. We're supposed to be ruling over you. We're supposed to be ruling the world. And I think how that plays out is they're not getting to rule the world as they should, according to Islam, where they're the best of peoples and we're the worst of creatures, where we're their dhimmis. We do what they tell us we can do. It's not happening that way. And I think it's causing problems because when they get in a situation where they get power over a 9-year-old girl or a 10-year-old girl or an 11-year-old girl, then it's a situation of, here's where I do get to be an authority over you. Here's where I get to show you my real status, and I get to show you your real status according to Islam. And you end up with all kinds of abuse. And the other component to all of this is that Western nations are so terrified of being called bigots that they'll just let this go on over and over and over again. Because if you come out and say, hey, there are massive gangs of Muslims who are raping young girls, you're a bigot, even though it's true, you're a bigot, and you're an Islamophobe, even though it's true.
The true bigots are the Islamic people, the most intolerant scumbags.
Even though what you're saying is entirely 100% true, you can't say it. And I think that is what's feeding the situation with Tommy. Doesn't matter if what you're saying is true. We just don't want you saying it. And so that's the situation.
Yeah, and Tommy got kicked off of Twitter for quoting some statistics or something like that. Is that right?
Tommy got...
And before we go on, yes, he was kicked off Twitter, and I have offered to create a Tommy Robinson Twitter account at some point. If Tommy wants me to do that, then I'll give him the account details, and he can change the email address and password. Only if Tommy wants me to do that, I would do that. And then Tommy can have a new Twitter account. I would do that because I like what he's doing, and I'm sorry that he got arrested. The UK government and the police are satanic. They are of Satan, and I can't stand that UK Prime Minister.
Kicked off of Twitter for saying Islam promotes killing.
That's right.
And that was the actual quote where they said, we're banning you from Twitter permanently for saying this, Islam promotes killing. And I spent several days after that posting the same thing and then supporting it with quotations, right? So I would quote Muhammad. I would put it up on the screen. Here's Muhammad saying, if anyone leaves his Islamic religion, kill him. Hey, Twitter, does this verse commanding people to kill apostates promote killing? Yes or no? I'd want to know. Because it's indisputable, right? It's indisputable that a command to kill apostates promotes killing. That's indisputable. You can't deny that, right? You'd have to throw out all laws of logic if you want to say that a command to kill doesn't promote killing, right? But now notice, the question there was not, hey, is he right? It's just you're not allowed to say it. You're not allowed to say what is a complete and obvious fact if you've read the Muslim sources. If anyone leaves his Islamic religion, kill him, clearly promotes killing.
And Satan of the Bible is a murderer, and the Islam religion is of Satan, and it's sickening. And I will speak out against Islam as well, and I'm prepared if Tommy Robinson ever replies to me down the track. I'm prepared to even create a Twitter account for him and give him the log-on details.
But you can't say it.
But when you quoted them, you didn't get banned, right?
No, and that shows that there are people who are targeting him, right? Because I posted it over and over and over again. I was adding Twitter, so I'm sending these directly to Twitter, and tons of people are retweeting them, which means they're going to Twitter again. And no matter what happened, I couldn't get banned. So so on the one hand, Twitter is banning people for saying certain things, but on the other hand, they are targeting specific people, right? Because at the end of the day, Twitter's a business, right? They don't want to just start banning everyone who says something about Islam. They're going to lose like what, a third of their users or something like this, and then their stocks plummet, and then they go out of business. So they have to be kind of careful when they're doing this. They have to select certain individuals and then to block them. So that's why you and I are still on there, Robert. They haven't targeted us, right?
I also think we're still on there because we are Americans, and that it's not that Twitter won't ban Americans, but if you look at some of the high-profile people that Twitter has banned, you've got Milo, who's English. You've got Paul Golding and Jada Franson from Britain First. They're English. You've got Shazia Hobbs, who is an ex-Muslim from England and who lives there now. You've got Tommy. And so I think that when you look at that, and there are others I could name as well, I would suspect that the British government is nudging Twitter and saying, get rid of these people who are causing us trouble.
And from their side, they're thinking that if you mention something about
and see, the British government doesn't understand that the Lord Jesus is in all control. He can kill me. He can have me die right now if Jesus wanted to. So these people in the British government have to be careful, because if they upset the Lord that much, the Lord can make them die if he wants to. If he wants to. And that's what I truly believe, and anyone can die at any time.
Islam being bad, then it enables the jihadists in some way. So, given that, what do you guys think about that as being a possible solution for peace, I guess? It's just ignore it and hope it goes away.
The problem is that all these things that David quoted and many others, like the Quran saying, kill them wherever you find them 3 times, in chapter 2, 191, chapter 4, verse 89, and chapter 9, 5, and so many other places where the Quran commands killing and the subjugation of unbelievers in chapter 9, verse 29, and be merciful to the Muslims but harsh to the unbelievers, chapter 48, verse 29, and on and on and on and on. Those things are going to still be there, even if we stop talking about them. Muslims are going to still read the Quran and still act upon it. And so the jihad will keep coming. We just won't be able to say anything in resistance.
Gotcha.
And I want to add that people don't understand really what they're doing when they start stamping out free speech, right? They really think, oh, you know, we don't want Islamophobes speaking about Islam and causing all this, you know, causing a bunch of a violent backlash against Muslims. So we're going to stop people from speaking. And they don't realize that is the opposite of what you need to do if you're concerned about Muslims, right? I don't want a violent backlash against Muslims who are walking down the street. I don't want that sort of thing. I'm horrified at that, but I understand the role that free speech plays in preventing that sort of thing. in the West, one of the things that has made the West great is that our default method of dealing with problems has become you talk about them, you protest, you debate, you speak, you fight when you have to. But other than that, when speaking will work, then you deal with problems with more speech. And there are places in the world and places historically that do not think that way. It's, oh, you disagree with me, you have to die, right? We have to fight over this. We have to fight to the death over this. You disagree with me, I'm going to kill you for it, right? And in the West, we've gotten past that to where you and I disagree. Well, let's debate it. Let's debate it. If I really, really disagree with you and we're not going to debate it, good, we'll protest or something like that. I'll expose your ideas as false. And what you have now are massive numbers of people in high places saying we can't allow the speaking because, this could lead to bad things. And they don't realize that once you start taking away speech as the default position, then people who are concerned about something are going to choose a different route, right? In other words, when there's a terrorist attack, I, of course, want the police and the government to stop the terrorist attack, right? I want them to go and round up the perpetrators. As far as what the rest of us do following a terrorist attack, I want us exposing the ideas that led to the terrorist attack. I want the ideas that led to the terrorist attack undermined and refuted so that in the coming generations, those ideas will already be undermined and exposed. When people start telling us, no, you can't talk about those things, you can't you can't undermine the ideology, you can't speak about the ideology, you have to keep your mouth shut about the ideology. Well, then look at what we're doing. We're trying to respond to a problem with speech, with refutation of ideas, and they're telling us don't do that. Well, guess what? There are people in this world, once they find out that this isn't a solution, that speaking is not allowed, they are going to turn to violence, right? That's not going to be me. That's not going to be Robert. That's not going to be the people who take us seriously. It's going to be people who say, the way that David and Robert and Pamela do these things, responding with speech, that's useless. That's outdated. It's not allowed. It doesn't work. We need a new method, and we just need a violent revolution. And so in the long run, we're the ones who are actually promoting peace towards Muslims who have nothing to do with jihad. We're the ones promoting peace. We're the ones kind of trying to protect them by just dealing with them on a level of speaking and not lashing out in violence. And the governments of the world and the media of the world and the educators in Hollywood are all saying, no, don't do it David and Robert and Pamela's way. Well, okay, but if you're not taking our route, you're going to take some other route.
Yeah, those people from Hollywood and the governments of the world, they are of the world, and I believe they are of Satan, unless if they are saved. But I hate Islam. It's definitely, Islam is a cult and it's satanic.
Because people aren't just going to put up with it forever. Once people start getting scared for their children, for their civilization, they're going to want to do something. And if they're not allowed to speak about that, they're going to do something else.
Right. And what do you guys think about, because this is what gets me, is when people, so say when you guys criticize Islam and then some Muslims get upset about it and then they kill other people, it's just saying that this kind of thing happens. Would that be your fault in your eyes?
That's what the government and media would have us believe, that yes, it's our fault, just like when President Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem and Palestinians rioted on the border between Gaza and Israel, and people were killed who turned out to be Hamas operatives and not innocent civilians at all. But in any case, President Trump was widely blamed, and people were saying, you did this and you have the blood on your...
No, Trump didn't do it. It is a false cult religion of Islam. It's so sickening to me. And I will speak out against Islam. It's sickening.
And because you moved the embassy. So what they're essentially saying is you have to be held hostage to other people being violent. And it's your fault if they are violent. When anybody, if they really stop and think about it, they would realize that if someone is violent, it's their responsibility.
Yep.
If John, next time I see you, I slug you, that's my fault. And no matter how much I say, well, you know, John said these terrible things to me, and I was just lashing out, nobody's going to buy that it was your fault. And yet, when it comes to statecraft and foreign policy, people take it for granted that if Muslims riot and kill, therefore it is the responsibility and the fault of the people that they are complaining about, and the people they're complaining about have to change their behavior so that Muslims won't riot and kill. Now, that's just giving in to violent intimidation. All it's going to do is encourage more violent intimidation. And we learned in 5th grade. We've all forgotten, but we learned in 5th grade. You don't give in to the bully. Then the bully will just keep bullying you.
What they should have done a long time ago in Britain and all the Western world, ban the Quran. That's what they should have done, and shouldn't have allowed them to practice Islam. It's sickening to me, and I'm offended by Islam. And the Quran offends me.
You have to fight it. You have to stand up. And otherwise, you're just going to encourage more bullying. And that's what we're doing on a global scale nowadays when we say, well, Muslims get violent if you talk about these things, therefore you must not talk about them. You're only going to make the Muslims see, oh, we can manipulate them through violence, and so let's threaten them about other things. And say, if you don't start making your women wear headscarves, we will kill you. Or if you don't do this or that accords with Sharia, we will kill you. And finally, we're completely submitted.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think one of the things that if we think about it and we just kind of just ignore all criticism of Islam and ignore all these things and kind of give in to just what they kind of want, it's almost, in my mind, it doesn't make any sense how it will increase peace. If anything, you're just going to get more and more Muslims who are going to be more and more prepared to threaten and kill when that time comes around. To return it back to Tommy, though, Robert, I know you have a little bit more knowledge on this than I do, at least. What do you have to say about Tommy's arrest? Was it legal?
Yeah, technically it was legal because he wasn't on probation. And a condition of the probation was that he not video outside these rape gang trials, because the stated excuse is that this will somehow prejudice the judgment and give a chance for these rapists to walk. Well, actually, they've been walking for years. They haven't been prosecuted for years. They've been going around acting freely when police have declined to do anything, even though they knew about it for years, because the police were afraid of being called racist. It's because the British government wants to continue that situation that they are trying to silence any discussion of the rape gangs. And so, yeah, they have Tommy on a technicality, but it's only a technicality. It's like everything Hitler did in Nazi Germany was legal because he passed laws that were in favor of what he was doing, and he made sure that those laws were passed so that everything he did, he could point to the law and say he was completely within his rights and authority as the Chancellor and the Führer. And so it's the same thing in Britain now, and that's a very disquieting development that Britain is behaving like a totalitarian state. They do have the law on their side, but the whole premise of the thing is wrong. To silence free speech about the rape gangs and to make sure that as few people know about what's happening as possible. And this is how a totalitarian state behaves.
What about the...
Oh, go ahead. John, I just wanted to add something real quick because I'm thinking about, while Robert's talking about that, I was thinking about like the perspective of, you know, your average British citizen, right? If up until the news started breaking, lots of people in Great Britain didn't know these things were going on, didn't know that there were these Islamic rape gangs taking literally thousands of young girls and turning them into sex slaves. They had no idea that this was going on. And then this story started breaking about how the government, how the police and other government agencies are informed over and over and over again that this is going on, and how they just keep silencing the situation because they're worried about seeming like bigots and Islamophobes. So they would rather have young girls being constantly gang raped for years than be called names, right? So this is going on for years, and then the average person starts finding out about this. The average person in Great Britain didn't know that this was happening, and then a few years ago when stories started breaking, they start finding out, wow, we really cannot trust our government to deal with this, right? We can't trust what our government tells us. We can't trust our government to respond the way that a government should, namely protecting their citizens. So people start realizing this, and they are rightly suspicious about how the government is dealing with this issue from that point on, right? I mean, when I hear the government screwing up like that, I'm thinking, wow, I really do not trust you guys. And what's the result? Well, the result is that as the trials are going on, you've got the government doing what they're claiming they're supposed to be doing, and you're concerned with whether they are doing a good job. So you want people reporting on what's going on, right? You want people standing outside the courthouse giving you updates. You want people keeping you updated. I want to know how the government is dealing with this problem. And then to learn, well, no one's allowed to speak about it. My goodness. I mean, you know, as bad as things get for free speech in the United States at times, they're nothing like they are in Europe right now. I mean, I couldn't even live there. And so I don't know how people are functioning right now in Great Britain. I mean, I would curl up into a ball if I were in that situation where I'm just no longer allowed to speak about gangs of people raping little girls, and you have to keep your mouth shut about it. So anyway, I feel bad for the people of Great Britain that's now the position that their government has put them in.
And that's
okay. Right. Now this will be end of part 1. I will continue to record from this. We play commentary from this point in part 2.